Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third meeting of the DSL Division 90 Rulemaking Advisory Committee. We might have some new people with us today, so we're going to do a quick round of introductions again. My name is Steve Faust. I work for 3J Consulting, and I will be facilitating the meeting today. And let's go to our main DSL staff, starting with Pete.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pete Ryan. I'm the Department of State Lands Aquatic Resource Specialist, and I'm leading the rule advisory for this development of the Division 90 rules. And I guess we can go to Danielle next.
Hey, hi, everybody. I'm Danielle Boudreau with DSL. I'm the rulemaking coordinator, so I kind of help shepherd the rules through the process.
Lynn?
Hi, I'm Lynn McAllister. I'm a jurisdiction coordinator at DSL, and I've been helping out with the rules draft revisions for quite a while now, before we started having these RAC meetings. So I'm just helping out with the RAC meetings and everything, all the other details that are involved.
Thanks, Lynn. And now I'm just going to go through the participant list as I have it from Zoom. As part of your introduction, please let us know if you are a RAC member or if you're an interested party or guest. So next I'm going to go to Brandon.
Oops, there we go. Good afternoon. Brandon Prishinger, Association of Oregon Counties, doing natural resource work, and I am a RAC member. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's go to Phil.
Hi, this is Phil Scholes. I am a wetland consultant and part of the RAC committee.
Thank you, Phil. Next, I'll go to Ariel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ariel Nelson with the League of Oregon Cities. I'm a lobbyist there for housing, land use, and development, and I am here as an interested party.
Thanks, Ariel. Let's go to Brad.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Livingston. I'm a RAC member and the statewide wetlands program coordinator for the Oregon Department of Transportation.
Thanks, Brad. I'm going to guess that's Dan. Yep.
Yes, I'm Dan Antonsen. I'm a GIS specialist with the Department of State Lands and am working here with this group as in my GIS professional capabilities here. So I'm working with Pete Ryan basically to help build up some stuff to help everybody hopefully work with this stuff easier.
Thank you, Dan. Ed.
Yeah, I'm Ed Strohmeyer with Tetra Tech, wetland specialist, and am a RAC member.
Thank you, Ed. Let's see here. Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Dorsey. I am here representing League of Oregon Cities, Water Resources Manager for City of Hillsborough, and I'm a RAC member.
All right. Sorry, Geo Resources. Sorry, I don't remember your name.
Hi, hi, everyone. I'm Alan Martin, and I am a RAC member.
Hello. Jevra.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jevra Brown with the Department of State Lands. I'm the Aquatic Resource Planner. I've been helping draft these rules and GIS stuff as well.
Thank you. Jody.
Gioni. I'm a consultant and a RAC member.
Welcome, Jody. John.
John Van Staveren with Pacific Habitat Services and a RAC member.
All right, Samantha.
I'm Samantha Bear. I'm government affairs doing land use and environmental work for the Oregon Home Builders Association, and I'm a RAC member.
Thanks, Samantha. And Stacy.
Good afternoon, Stacy Reed, wetland consultant with AKS, and I'm a RAC member.
Welcome, everyone. I think that's everyone. Did I miss anyone? Please unmute and let the group know if I missed anybody. Okay, great. Well, in just a minute, I'm going to hand it over to Pete to lead us through, pretty similar to what we did last time, to lead us through section by section. I want to thank everyone for all of the review and comments that you submitted. I know Pete and the team would echo that as well, because it was really helpful in between meetings to get all your comments in that fashion, and hopefully the response document that was sent out was helpful as well in helping you understand kind of the thinking behind a lot of the proposed changes. So Pete's going to take us through the proposed rule changes. We'll have a public comment period for any members of the public who want to chime in. Then I'll kind of summarize what we accomplished today, and then Danielle will take us through next steps before we adjourn. So if there are no questions about the agenda, without further ado, I will hand it over to Pete.
I have a question.
Bill, go ahead.
It's about process. Just curious, we've got a lot of people here, and we've got some tough topics on our agenda here. How do we handle where part of the group is in disagreement with a different part of the group on a particular issue?
Sure. And we've kind of gone over this the last two meetings in our introductory presentation. So sorry, we didn't do that again today. We're striving for consensus, right? So we have a proposal. We have proposals in the red line document. If someone disagrees with those proposals, they can raise that issue. They should also, as part of that, say what changes they would propose making, to satisfy them. And for consensus, we need you to basically either support or agree not to oppose the proposed changes, right? You don't have to support them 100%, but if you are comfortable enough with them where you will not oppose them, then that's consensus if the group reaches that point. If someone disagrees or cannot support a proposal, they should raise that along with their recommendation on what would put them in a place where they could support it, and then the group will consider that proposal. If we go back and forth over a period of time and we can't agree, then our report to the decision makers at DSL will state kind of both of the proposals, or whatever the proposal and the alternative proposals, so that they can see kind of where this group landed on an issue. But hopefully we'll be able to get to consensus on most of the items. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Samantha.
Steve, are you guys looking for consensus today or by a certain period of time? Where are we at timeline wise for the RAC?
Yeah, we're definitely looking for consensus today as we go through each section. Yeah, that's kind of what we've stated all along.
Okay, I'm just going to say that's going to be a little bit of a challenge again for my organization. We have had, we didn't get these until after 5 on Friday, I think last week, and have had little time. I've sent this out to our attorneys and my members, but I don't have a lot of feedback from them yet. So that's giving consensus today is going to probably not be possible for me.
Understood. Thank you. Okay, Pete, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okie doke. Danielle, are you going to share the red line? Yeah.
So can everybody see that? Oh,
Yeah.
It's sharing my screen and not the actual, sorry. All right, can everybody see it or?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I can see it. It's a little big.
Oh, it's a little big. Okay, I had it about what it was last time. So
Okay. I think we can see it all now. I thought maybe some of the screen was getting cut off on the right side, but maybe we can see it all.
Yeah.
Okay, and for
There we go.
for me, Danielle, I have the same document open on my desktop, and I'm gonna, because it's easier for me to see, because I can toggle back and forth between red line and off on my document. So I'm going to read it from my screen, but I'll let you'll be able to sense that I'm moving on, right? So you can roll it as I move on.
Yeah.
Right? That makes sense. Okay. Okay, everybody, here we go. I want to again, like Steve said, I want to thank everybody for this. Oh my gosh, got a lot of great comments. It's really helping create a better product. Hopefully we can move through this in an efficient manner. Okay, to start, purpose in section 5. The state originally removed of this state from this section, but due to comments from the RAC, we've replaced it. So it is back in there again.
Let's pause there for a second. I know there were a lot of questions about that, Pete. Do you want to just kind of clarify?
Well, we agreed with what the RAC's opinion. It was in our response doc that the removal from this section didn't make sense because we were talking about jurisdictional waters of the state. So we put it back in. So it wouldn't imply that we were doing this for other waters that might not be jurisdictional.
Are there any questions or comments about that?
Yeah, this is Samantha. That was my comment to Peter. Also, Peter, thank you so much for listening. And I think this is greatly improved from the last draft. Like I said, I have this out to our attorneys to look over. So I'll follow up when I get the green light officially, but I think that this looks a lot better.
Okay, great. So I think we can move to the next section unless there's any other comments. Okay, the next section is applicability. And again, we got the same comment that removing of this state kind of changed the sense of the applicability in number 1 of section 10. We as a group decided, we took it to different members of the agency and we decided to put it back in. Unfortunately, the red line we're seeing now does not show that, but the comment response document does show that. So we will correct it.
How should it read, Pete?
It will read, these rules establish the standards and procedures used by the Department of State Lands to identify waters of this state, comma, which are subject to the regulation and authorization requirements of the removal fill law.
It sounded like you did not say wetlands. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, gotcha. That's exactly right.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments about this change or reversal of change?
There is a we inserted a comma after in front of which, and after, oh, there it is there. I see it. Never mind.
Okay.
No comments. Okay, we're moving to the next section. Let's see. The next section where people had comments was definitions, section 3. Did anybody have any questions in section 15 before we get there? The policy section.
Okay.
Okay, then we're going to definitions. Okay, the department is leaving. Well, I guess we're starting with this definition of aquatic resource special concern. This definition is essentially identical to the one that's in Division 85 and also Division 93. And does anybody have comments about this definition? And there was an additional kind of clarification in our response document where the need for this was there was a line in here about and others as determined by the department. That was a request from the RAC that developed Division 85 and Division 93. They both wanted that added for the flexibility in the future and new science. Okay, is there any comment?
Let's keep going to the next one.
Okay, the next one we had comments on was, or actually I might have been DSL decided. It's about, it was a comment from the RAC. Number 7, or last time, I'm not sure if the numbers are lined up. Okay, consultant. Okay, we changed it to mean a person as defined in ORS 196-810 who provides professional services to the public. And if you go to that ORS, it defines person. So there was some comment before about how we defined consultant, including different groups, and this we thought was just simpler.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, the next one is definition. Well, old 10, is it now still 10? Let's see, it was some of the numbers changed when we
What's the topic, Pete?
We added delineation as number 10. So
yeah, so that
anything
right, so that
after our
right.
delineation map, sorry, we added delineation map is now number 10. It moved from wetland delineation or wetland map.
Yeah, the next comment was about the old 10, which was determination.
Okay.
And it doesn't show it in the red line copy, but after the comment from the public and consultation with other parts of DSL, we decided to put it back into the first sentence.
Put what back in the
waters of this of this state part.
Okay, so can you read how that should read, please, Pete?
Okay, you bet. Determination means a decision that a site may, does, is unlikely to, or does not contain waters of this state. So it was that last, we added the wetlands and other waters comment instead of the waters of this state. Does that make sense? So we're deleting the wetlands and other waters.
Yeah. Great.
And the last sentence stays the same.
Any questions or comments about this definition? All right. Pete, do we want to go back up to some of those definitions?
We should definitely go to the delineation one.
Okay.
Is the delineation one that was new? No, that's not the new one, is it? It was delineation map. That's
yeah,
the new
sorry,
one.
delineation map. Wetland map was changed to delineation map, and to put it in alphabetical order is now at definition 10. It moved from 45 to 10.
Okay, and that was a comment from the RAC. They thought it would be more inclusive to say delineation map because that would involve, everything in the report as opposed to just wetlands. Any comments about that? Right. Okay. Next one I have is 13, but it's probably 14, right? Okay, we added we added the definition of fill, and we made it identical to the one in removal fill for consistency.
Pete. This is Brandon from Oregon Counties. I had heard from one of our county planners that if we're going to reference the 50 cubic yards in the removal, that we should include it here in the fill also. So I appreciate the addition there in blue. And then I think this is the first time that we are referencing ESH. So my question would be, do we need, since this is the first time, and I think it shows up a couple other times, do we need to spell out what that is?
I think that's a good suggestion.
I think it should be habitat areas. Yep. Thank you, Brandon. Any other questions or comments about this? About the fill definition? Okay, keep rolling, Pete.
Okay, so we're passing some that no one had comments on, like some new inserted definitions. We see them. The next one we had a comment on was 20. If anybody has comments about these inserted ones, let us know. Okay, well, it's going to be 21, isn't it? Sorry. In this one, there was a comment to add a S to landowner, but wasn't that what it was? Make sure I got that right. Creating, okay, or it wasn't add a S, but add a S in parentheses on both sides to imply it could be singular, plural or singular. But we went back to ORS and ORS did not do that. So we stuck with ORS and left off the parentheses, the S. Okay, the next one's the one right after that, 22, local wetlands inventory. There was a comment that wetlands should be plural in that rule, and we did. We added the S, as you can see there, after wetland.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is going to be 27, normal circumstances. Okay, so our comment was, why did we change things? We changed them to line up better with the Corps' guidance on normal circumstances. And that was just in the first sentence of the definition. And the second sentence is identical to the way it was in the old rule. There was a comment for additional kind of detail about this this normal circumstances definition. And we suggested that that might be a better thing to put in the body of the report. If you have specific situations that need to be addressed kind of case by case. And I'm assuming there might be a comment on this. Does anyone have comments?
Questions or comments on normal circumstances?
Hey, Pete, it's Stacy. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to raise my hand. I apologize. Do we want to add in a time frame? Something to the 5-year effect here?
Where would you put that, Stacy?
Just something that it was always my understanding that something is normal on the site if it's been that way for at least 5 years.
We can make a note of that comment. Generally, it's you know, there's policy and there's what we put in rule. We usually don't put dates like that because it's a very case by case situation. You want to look at things, about the considerations of permanence and all that stuff. So I hate to put a date on it, but I'll take further comments on that if anybody has any.
Yeah, this is Lynn. I'm wondering, Stacy, where that came from. Your understanding of the 5-year thing.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but I feel like it's tied to the Corps' definition, meaning that, and also with maybe your removal fill violation cases, if something has been a certain way for a certain amount of time, if it's a fill material or something like that, it's no longer a violation because it's been in place and it's. I could be muddling two different terms together. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything official, but I think some things have gotten around, through time, just informally, that might not really be official. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure where that 5-year thing is from, if it's written anywhere.
Bill?
It's an unwritten rule. Corps of Engineers won't ever put in writing, partly because there are some violations that might go back 10 years that are still ongoing. And if it was an unauthorized activity and it continues, they typically consider normal circumstances to not apply.
Yeah.
Jabra?
Yeah, I would second that, Phil. I think those things are looked upon on a case-by-case basis. There's not a hard and fast timeline.
Right. John?
Yeah, just one. It was actually my memories from the Food Security Act manual, and it was considered to be abandoned. So I think it hasn't been in rules since then, but it carried through because of that manual.
Thanks, everyone. It sounds like maybe we will not add that reference. But if someone disagrees with that, let us know. Let's keep
we're moving on. The next one was on 30, the definition 30, which was for other waters. There were comments about why we removed waters of the state from this definition. And we explained that it was previously incorrect because not all other waters are jurisdictional waters of the state. And this definition is not about jurisdiction, was the response we gave in our response doc. And we're trying to make a clear distinction between other waters and waters of the state. But we want to hope we're consultants required to map them all, and DSL makes the jurisdictional determinations and determines which are other waters, which are waters of the state.
Questions, comments? All right.
Okay, the next questions were about the definition of removal, which is 34 now, I think. Yeah. And we inserted this to line up with our definition of fill we have, and we want to have them both in here, and we want to have them be identical to what's in Division 85. So there were no changes made to it from Division 85. And in our response doc, we kind of linked it to the ORS, or we kind of we showed the ORS in the footnotes.
Okay.
There was some
No comments?
there was additional comment in the emailed comments about equivalent of weight in tons was confusing to some people. But we just left in there because that was the exact same one that was in Division 85. And we think it was due to, the use of this for gravel mining. But, it's not really a thing that occurs in delineation reports. Weight in tons. I don't think I've ever requested that in any report I've ever reviewed.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so the next one we had was about site-specific methods. And we just kind of explained what we meant. We're just trying to remove unnecessary language in the site-specific section of the report. Because sometimes people, maybe include too much information and they do it for every report, the identical piece of information, but it's not needed if it's not site-specific. So we're just trying to encourage people to keep the reports tight and just about the site in question. Okay.
So Pete, if I may, I'll just read it real quick.
Mhm.
Site-specific methods means sampling, delineation, and investigative procedures used to address the unique circumstances at a site. Boilerplate content from the manual and generic procedures are not site-specific. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. If there's no questions or comments, we can keep moving.
Okay, for the next one, it's about the statewide wetland inventory definition. We inserted the word potential in front of wetlands in this definition, just based on a comment from a RAC member, and we agreed to it.
Okay.
Regarding the definition, which is probably now 42, yeah, waters of the state. A RAC member suggested adding additional information about man-made and artificial features. We did not include them in this definition. They could be waters of the state, but that's all described in Division 85 in the exceptions. So.
Questions or comments? Okay.
Okay, a wetland delineation report. Oh yeah, okay. So there was a request to maybe remove the word wetland from the front of delineation report, but our ORS uses the word wetland, and so we're sticking with it because it kind of defines a wetland delineation report in ORS, and so we're sticking with it in these rules. And there was another question of why was of the state removed from this definition, and we agreed with the comment, and so we restored of this state to this definition. And let's see, and so but it didn't show up in the red line we sent out.
Danielle will add that right now.
Okay.
But wetlands and other waters are remaining. Is that correct?
Trying to find an example here. Waters of the state. Gosh, I don't have the one you're sending. Okay. Where was it deleted? Right there, that first one. Yeah, that just goes back in. And the one at the end stays the same, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions about wetland delineation report definition? All right.
Okay.
Done with the definitions.
Right, done with the definitions. So section 25 are procedures for determinations conducted entirely by the department. And there were some questions in here about what was it? The use. Oh, yeah. So there was a question. I'm not sure who provided it again, but it was about section 25, and it just said section or parts D and E. But if you look at this rule, there are three locations where D and E exist in the rule in this section 25. So I wasn't exactly sure my response was correct for what the question was. And so I took it to section 4. Right. And the section 4 D and E are about a site location map and a detailed site plan. And then in my response, I kind of explained why DSL needs those when we're doing determinations by the department. So I'm not sure if I got the right response on that. If whoever asked that question has clarification, that'd be great.
Or needs clarification, but if maybe you got it right, Pete.
Yeah.
I don't see any hands, so let's keep moving.
Okay, there was also in that section a question on section 9E or F. They suggested some additional language for a soil survey map or a sketch map. And then the suggestion was, or an equivalent map using GIS shapefiles downloaded from an online source. And I think what we decided, we didn't really understand how this would be helpful. And we were hoping that maybe the RAC member that suggested that could give us some more clarification about that response.
Go ahead, Phil.
That was me. I know that some people are using GIS generated maps with soil survey stuff that they downloaded from NASA's database. So when you said a soil survey map, that tends to suggest something that NRCS produced as opposed to shapefiles that you downloaded. So I was trying to just sort of leave it open-ended so that kind of official shapefiles could be used for those determinations rather than suggesting a physical map or a web soil survey printout or something like that.
Okay, so but this is our reports done entirely by the department.
I realize that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that some of your staff, is using GIS and not necessarily using the soil survey physically or.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You mean the old paper maps or?
The paper maps or web soil survey. I would imagine that you've probably, downloaded, the line work from the NRCS database so that you could be using those mapping units on anything for your internal uses.
That's correct. That's what we do.
So it just trying to give you the option to have some kind of surrogate of the physical maps or the physical downloads from web soil survey.
You're right. And the reason this was still probably hanging around, Phil, is because, these rules, when they probably were photocopied.
They used to be paper.
We've got Samantha and then Jevra.
Yeah, so this is kind of a broader comment on the category of GIS, similar to what Phil's saying. I've heard from a lot of practitioners, particularly smaller shops and some of the older guard, that just some concerns around narrowing things to just GIS data, just because a lot of the shops don't necessarily always use that technology, and they're maybe a little bit more old school on how they do things, and just wanting to make sure, like Phil said, that there's an option available if they're able to use a different form of technology that's as accurate as GIS, if they don't have access to that specifically.
Thanks, Samantha, and thanks, Phil, for submitting that comment previously. Pete, is this the point in the document where we want to have this discussion, or does it come up again later?
It comes up again in section 35. So
yeah, let's discuss that there. But thanks, Samantha and Phil. We'll put a pin in that. Deborah? Oh, go ahead, Pete.
Oh, I was just going to say I like Phil's comment if we're going to consider that. So,
Deborah.
Well, I can discuss it at a later date. I think we want to be very careful with how we're wording this, and
you're talking about E and F here.
Yeah, because the source should still be from the NRCS. It shouldn't be, we shouldn't be getting our soils from, even if we get them from a data set, that data set should still come from NRCS, either directly or indirectly. So it could come from DAS Geo, but that's directly from NRCS. And then we don't want to necessarily say shapefile because that's old school or getting to be old school. So let's think about how we want to word those things.
Thanks, Deborah. I don't, we'll go to Phil in a second. I don't see how this, as it's written now, limits the department in wet maps, as long as, like you said, I think by including NRCS, it says that that's the source of the data, but I don't see any language that limits to physical or non-physical maps. So Phil, maybe you can clarify.
I don't need to clarify. I was just going to add an additional comment. It applies to this section and to that future section. If you don't know, U.S. Forest Service uses something they call a soil resource survey instead of an NRCS soil survey. So I don't know if you want to open the door for, something like that. It's probably pretty rare that you're getting that need out there, but there's vast parts of the state that aren't mapped by NRCS, but they do have some kind of mapping either by Forest Service or BLM.
Pete?
That's all good information, and we'll add it to the things to consider.
So is there a proposal to change this at this time that we want to consider from the RAC? Phil, do you have a specific proposal of language or?
So we're talking specifically about 9E or F, like.
Correct.
My thoughts are, I'll let you guys fine tune the language.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, the next one we had comments on was about the manual in section 30, technical requirements. We considered it some more. We heard the comment and we reduced it down even a little further. So I believe this one got into my edits, didn't it? Yes. So the concept here is when we inserted the word manual in this number 1, that manual is the same manual that's up in definitions, and it has all the extra language there. I think it's just manual, that's fine. But that including regional supplements and applicable guidance is in the definition above. And since we removed some other parts of that definition above, like the full name of the manual and everything, we are removing it from this section because it's above. And we left the last part because those are the DSL supplied guidance documents and technical supporting stuff. And I know Brad had a comment about maybe we should also add information about the ordinary high water guidance that was just released in a draft mode last week from the Corps. I think that information like that, Brad, could be included in this, other guidance from the Corps. So the stuff that's all up in the definition above of the manual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know it was tricky to try to figure how do you do that when it's still a year out from being implemented. So thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. If there are no questions or comments, we'll move on to the next.
Okay. The next one is, it's still number 5, right? In section 35, so. Okay, and this is the GIS. So we reworded the first sentence to say GIS data must be submitted and conformed, because before it was unclear if it was required or not. But we're going to be open. This will be a discussion point, everyone. And and conform to the delineation, GIS template, and data description provided by the department. We invited Dan Antonsen here because he's just prepared these documents for the LWIs, and we're working on the exact same similar documents for delineation reports. So if anybody had questions about either the template or the data description, Dan could answer those for anyone. Generally kind of high elevation responses, and the document will be ready before the rule becomes effective, and likely sooner than that if anybody has questions about it. So that's the first part, is just that GIS template and data description.
Is this the item? Oh, Phil, go ahead.
I don't want to sound like I'm too distrustful, but I think, as a part of the review committee, we should be seeing that kind of template now rather than later on. This is a pretty big, significant issue, and I know that there's stuff to be worked out, but I think that's part of the point, is let's not rush this requirement without sort of seeing how we have to present all this information and figure out how much time it's going to take to do it and so on.
Thanks, Phil. Samantha?
Yeah, I share Phil's concern also, because I'm just not sure, is the GIS template complete? And will it be complete upon the effective date of these rules?
My full intention is to have it be complete, but we have to work with other parts of the department. So
yeah, because I think you just have a practical enforceability issue by referencing, a document that's not in existence. And so, yeah, I just think there's maybe a cart before the horse issue on this section.
Go ahead, next person with your hand up. Sorry. It's the Geo Resources email address. I keep forgetting.
Oh, hi, this is Alan Martin.
Alan, yeah, thanks.
Hi, I just have some questions related to this about the purpose. What is going to be done with this GIS data? What's the objective here? Some of the background information about how we got to this point of somewhat suddenly saying you will now submit GIS data, and it's almost full blown before we even had much notice that this is going to be required. How you got here? Is that something that would be available to just talk about the purpose, the objective? How will the data be used? When will it be rolled out for whatever purpose it will be used for?
Yes, I can do it quick, and I'm hoping Jeffrey can fill in if I miss something. So the goal of this request was, we already asked for GIS data when projects are large or complicated, because it helps staff review the study area if we have the GIS, as opposed to a stack of 1,000 paper maps.
And Pete, you're saying right now you request, but it's not required?
It's not required now.
Okay.
It's like strongly recommended to speed up reviews. Right. Otherwise, the review is going to go way slower for a large linear report. This request is related to our development of the statewide wetland inventory. Our goal is to have, if you read the definition of the statewide wetlands, it includes department reviewed and approved delineations. That's part of the statewide wetlands inventory. So the public has the right to see all that information that currently sits in a back room at DSL and a bunch of paper copies. So it's that effort to share this with the public was the driver on this.
And so Pete, while I haven't heard a specific idea for a change here, I think we've heard from several people and some written comments from Phil earlier that there's concern about the requirement, I think for several reasons. I think the mention that the template isn't available, also the cost for folks who are not currently using GIS to bring that capacity online. So I just want to raise the issues that are on the table right now. Phil?
Well, a couple things. Peter, are you inferring that the statewide inventory is going to be a platform that everyone's going to be able to access?
Yes, it is now. I mean, it's available right now, Phil, but it has NWI on it, LWI, study areas, NHD, but we'd like to also include delineations. And there's an ongoing project right now that DSL is working on with an EPA grant to gather study areas, you know, like which is be tax lot data for areas that have concurrences on them.
So would this be something like Oregon Explorer?
It's not Oregon Explorer. It's our enterprise map systems. I mean, have you seen the ESH map? It's a similar map. It's just the statewide wetland inventory map. It's on our website.
I haven't seen that, so I'll have to look that up.
Okay, but it's an enterprise mapping systems, so it's very user friendly. That's the goal.
Alan?
When would that
Go ahead.
that information get posted? You know, during the review, like you have
No,
delineation reports?
It'd be following approval, following concurrence.
What other jurisdictions that do wetland delineation reviews are requiring shape files? I mean, for example, Corps of Engineers is not requiring it, but are there other state type agencies elsewhere in the United States that are requiring this?
That I don't know. You know, we're requiring it because it's in our definition of an ORS of the statewide wetlands inventory.
What does that definition say about requiring us to provide these shape files?
Well, it says nothing about shape files, probably because they didn't have them back then, or maybe, but it does say that every delineation, and we thought the only way to share this easily with the public, you know, we have, and you know this too, is that, you know, consultants routinely request us to go back into the back room and photocopy old reports for their review purposes, which we do. You know, it's part of the statewide wetlands inventory, but we thought this would be a better way to do that, to share it with the public.
Alan?
If that were the case, why not just make it voluntary and sort of see how well that goes as opposed to mandating it?
So is that a recommendation, Phil?
It is a recommendation, but it's related to a bigger issue, which is this requirement is being rolled out in a fairly sort of nonchalant kind of way, when in fact it's actually a very significant requirement for consultants, especially the smaller companies. And so, you know, I mean, it's one thing to say that, you know, in 5 years we want to have everyone providing this, but to say, you know, in a fairly short time after adopting the rules, that's very, you know, difficult for people to find time to, you know, ramp up that speed. But, you know, another thing is, and this isn't necessarily, you know, pointing a finger at DSL, anytime you sort of make a big step up on, you know, technology requirements, the people who are submitting stuff in that first year or two are guinea pigs, and we are being tested on, you know, how to provide that information and how to fine tune it. And it would really be nice not to be a guinea pig and sort of, you know, have you roll out this process of using shape files and posting them up on that inventory. Do that with voluntary information, and I think, one, it will be received better. Two, it gives the smaller shops time to, you know, sort of see what's being provided and how they sort of need to, you know, step in that direction, but they don't have to literally, you know, just you know, go out and buy new computers and buy software, take GIS classes and so on.
Thanks, Phil. Let's continue that conversation, Alan.
is this the point where we state that we disagree with this?
Yes, definitely.
This is the point where I disagree.
Alan,
And
go
what
ahead.
would be required to support it would be, number one, to see the template and have a chance to review it, the template and data description that's going to be required, and have a chance to review it in conjunction with coming to agreement with these revisions.
Alan, alternatively, would you support kind of what Phil was getting to about making the providing the GIS data voluntary for some period of time?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to hear from other members of the RAC about how they feel about the proposals that we heard from Phil and Alan.
This is Lynn. I do agree. I have to say, I like that idea better than just putting this out there full force. And I do have the same concern about the smaller consultants. So I would agree with it, to make it voluntary at first.
Thanks, Lynn. There's a comment here that says, what if, oh, okay, we're getting hands up. So, but there's a chat from Dan that says, what if you backed away from just GIS data and include CAD drawings as well? So maybe people can address that as they provide their comments. So since we've heard from Phil and Alan, let's go with Brad and then John.
Yeah, I just support what's being said here. I mean, for ODOT, it's not the end of the world because we've got a whole GIS unit. But I can totally understand with the smaller shops, and the fact that we don't have the template to review is a big deal.
Thanks, Brad. John?
Yeah, the issue that we've had, I mean, we have no problem with GIS, so that's fine. But the concern I have is that, especially for smaller shops, the issue is a lot of surveyors have local datums they tie to and not, state plane. So we've had trouble converting CAD files to GIS worthy, files, shape files. So that would be an issue. I'd like to see, the template and how it's described, but I know that we've had that problem. If you said you would accept CAD files, that would certainly make it easier. But GIS has been an issue for us.
All great comments.
Yeah. Phil? Do you have a new comment or was your hand just still up? Sorry if I missed that. I'll just say, it seems like we've had kind of several proposals that might resolve this issue. One, making it voluntary for some period of time. Another, adding that, that the department would accept CAD files. And then also, Alan mentioned just the desire to see that template. So I'm not sure the best way to resolve that, Pete, but before we do, Jessica has her hand up.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Steve. It was just kind of following along with what you were saying. I guess I'd be curious how an approach to extending the time frame for the GIS requirement would impact the RAC's ability to look at that template. Would we, by saying, we're going to give X amount of years for GIS data requirement, are we then taking review of this template off the table? Because we're saying we don't care what's in the template. We're just saying we want more time to comply with this.
Pete, I guess
that would be up for consideration, maybe.
I think that would
be answered.
Sure. That's probably going to go back to me. I haven't talked to Dan about the specifics. He's been very busy on other projects, and he's the guy that I need to go through to get the thing done. And so I can't give you an assurance that it'll be done by the end of this RAC. So my hope was to have it done by the time this went for public review. But I need to coordinate with Dan to get a date that we could finish it up. So I mean, there's questions, and then we have the holidays. I mean, there's all these other things in the way. But
thanks, Jever, you've got hands going everywhere. Why don't you go ahead and give your comment, and then I'll talk with Pete. You're on mute right now. Yeah.
Sorry, I hit the wrong hand button. So the data description, the document that describes what the template, the template is a GIS vessel into which you put your data. So the template itself may not be that helpful, but the document that describes the data and what the template would or what the data set would include. So both Phil and John have had experiences with the LWI data description. The delineation data description is much easier. So I'd love both of your input. But that is almost ready. So I'm just going to leave it there and leave it. I'm going to kick it back to Pete and Dan.
Let's go to Phil quick.
Yeah. My concern, one, I will say I'm with Alan in that I'm not supportive of this at this time. And I would want to see this reworded and voluntary. But that being said, I'm curious, DSL, we know that like Oregon Department of Transportation's got a number of standards for submitting information via that's GIS related stuff. I think the Department of Administrative Affairs, has stuff. And I guess I'm wondering is, have other parts of the Oregon state government already sort of set standards for how information's provided, and can it be sort of consistent with those? The other thing is that, and it sort of gets into some of the subsequent items here, populating all the metadata is time consuming. And I would probably disagree a little bit with Jevra that, in an LWI, an extraordinary amount of information, and time is put into the database that goes along with the GIS. And, from a budgeting point of view, I would probably quadruple the amount of time I think it takes to the amount of time it actually takes to do that. So I'm looking at, if we're having to require GIS stuff and populating things the way it's sort of being laid out, it's adding a minimum of $500 to a report. $1,000 is probably more reasonable. And if it were a big project, that's adding $1,500. And that's, especially for those small companies, that's the difference between whether or not they get the job or whether they lose it, because they're going to be slower than a company that's got a full-time GIS technician.
Jevra, it looks like you've got something. I want to get back to kind of trying to move forward, but go ahead.
Well, I really hope that. So Phil, there's a backstory with the LWI data set and the evolution of that, and really the delineation data set is much simpler, just to ease your mind, but I really do look forward to your feedback on it.
So Pete, maybe two things here. Number one, maybe you could answer you or Dan the question that Phil had about standards. And then number two, do you have a proposed resolution for, I think we're hearing enough opposition to this to know that we need to make some changes like per the RAC. And do you feel comfortable proposing something, or would you like to ruminate on this and have this be a topic that we cover at our fourth meeting?
Well, I'd feel best about kicking it to the fourth, and then having the RAC see what we're going to propose before that. So,
okay. And then the question about standards, state standards.
I think Dan would be a better person to respond if Dan's still in the room.
Yeah, I'm still here. We should be able to get access if you're referring to a specific standard that say ODOT has set. I probably haven't seen it because I don't deal with them in that way currently. I'd be happy to look at other standards or other documentation that's been developed to support data sets. We have a few of our standards that we've developed within DSL, and what we've done is attempt to follow similar standards that have been developed for GIS data at the state level. So there's a host of standards that have been developed and are in work for GIS data, and what we've developed look very similar. They're not as wordy because we're not going through a formal standard development process. They're really more of a description of what the data sets are and how they're built.
Thanks, Dan. Alan.
I would propose that something similar about what's been discussed up till now, and that's roll out what you're expecting. If it's similar, like what Jevra, if it's simpler, like what Jevra is saying, then let's see it. Let's see what you expect. And then let's not make it mandatory initially. Just roll out what you want us to provide as far as GIS data, and then give us an opportunity to work with it and make some suggestions and see how it flies before mandating it. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is the last meeting, there was a question about this as far as the language, whether it was clear that it must be submitted. And now we kicked it to this meeting and it's clear that the data must be submitted, but now we're going to kick it to the next meeting. I'm thinking it just seems like this is more than just housekeeping, as what was mentioned when we kicked off this, and having it keep getting kicked to the next meeting is a little frustrating.
Sorry to hear that, Alan. I think because it's an important issue, that's why it's taking a little more time than some of the more minor housekeeping. I agree with you. This I would not classify as housekeeping, but in an effort to be responsive to the comments of the RAC, which I feel are pretty well unanimous here. And I think there's some support. There is support for, at the very least, making these voluntary rather than required for some period of time. I heard support from RAC members, so I think it's appropriate to give Pete and the department some time to make revisions based on these specific comments and come back and get those to you ahead of the next meeting, so we can get some finality to it at meeting number 4. And if there are no objections to that approach, thanks, Alan, then we can, I think we can move on to the next topic.
Okay, sounds good. The next part I have is 7, B and C. Okay, and this was the proposal from DSL that every this is the field method section, I think, correct? That there were, when the people are out in the field, they document they classify the wetlands by coordinate and by HGM, and if an ARSC is identified, they also do the field method to identify that. And this same information continues on. So this is field methods. It's also in the text of the report, and it's also in the mapping, and it was also in the GIS too. But so this, what we're just saying, we just better classifying of these wetlands, because this information is going to be required in the permit, and we just wanted to reinforce that, and this would just it would streamline the process for people that are going for a permit. I know there's lots of comments about, well, what if I'm not asking for a permit? Well, the report is good for 5 years, and there's a good chance that it might be used for a permit in the future. And it doesn't seem like it would be that much extra effort, but I'm waiting to hear from the RAC members to tell me what type of effort this would involve to classify coordinate, HGM, and identify an ARSC if present. We're going to ask for the ARSC anyway. I mean, if staff sees it when they're doing their review, because it's an important thing to document. So here was just kind of a heads up to have it in rule in front. But
yeah, let's hear if there's questions or concerns. Brad, you start.
I think this plays into the mapping discussion. To know, just because the 10th of an acre is relatively small. And so just throw it in there.
Phil?
I gotta agree with Brad. A 10th of an acre is, 4,300 square feet. So
Yeah.
that's a really small area, especially if you're delineating something that's, 50 or 80 acres. There should be a little higher threshold than a 10th of an acre, especially when it turns out that you got sort of a mosaic. You're making a lot of extra polygons that especially might be in situations that you're going to be avoiding those wetlands.
Thanks. Phil, do you have would you propose, so if you were to make a change, would you propose a different threshold? And if so, what do you think would be
I
reasonable?
think a half acre is reasonable.
Okay. Samantha?
Yeah, so I have a question about the study area, so you might want to come back to me if that's too separate from this.
Is that in this? I guess it does say study area. So
yeah, it's throughout.
It's referred throughout the rule, right? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Samantha.
Okay, so I understand changing from a parcel or a tax lot to a study area. I understand why the department wants to do that. However, is a study area potentially over portions of property outside of single ownership? Could a study area go onto your neighbor's property?
Like we said in our responses on the response document, that study area is defined by the consultant. So they theoretically, and when they sign a thing on our cover form saying that they have access, or at least that they have permission that will allow DSL access if we need to review the site. So we're taking the consultants and the applicants at their word that they've gotten permission to include the areas they're including. A lot of times it's right-of-way areas that are public. So we depend a lot on the consultants to not delineate private property that no one wanted them on. So
okay, yeah, so just generally, the comment I've gotten for folks is this seems like this is going to be a lot bigger of an area than perhaps a single tax lot or a confined, legal area. And if you're trying to build on just one tax lot, you're trying to build on like one specific area, are you going to be potentially having to map and delineate other areas that you're not really wanting to at that time? And so is this a lot larger of an area? It seems like it is, but I hear what you're saying, that there's nothing necessarily in here directing a consultant. It's going to be up to the consultant to keep it on their client's property.
Right. The consultant drives the study area boundary. We verify it in our review that they had access.
Okay.
That helps.
Yeah.
Thanks, Samantha. Stacy?
Going back to mapping, Corey, and I do appreciate you wanting to include it here. And I just wonder if you could just simplify it and maybe revise it just to say mapped areas and not even include a minimum size threshold. Just because I think that's your intent, right? Is just to be able to map approximate PM versus PSS and vice versa, just so that it's approximately on the map.
The goal was to meet the aquatic resource coordinator's question or ask. They asked the JCs, hey, can you get coordinate on the delineation part of this process so that we can have it in the permit? So there's a section 6 in the JPA that requests this information, and it's pretty specific about what it needs. And so we tried to match that request in our delineation. So, and I believe the 10th of an acre was also directly from the ARCs. Isn't that correct, Trevor? Yeah. So that they requested that 10th of an acre split for their permitting.
Right, but I wonder if you could just generally for concurrence maps, just have the areas mapped. You know what I'm saying? Just generally, and then if somebody's going in for a permit, then they can dial it down a little bit more detail if needed.
Yeah, the thought was that the JCs are the experts on doing these reviews more so than an ARC, and that they could, it would be a one-stop shop, theoretically streamlining the process, because the ARCs wouldn't need to question it. They would just say, oh, it's been JC approved. We're going to go with these areas or these classifications. So that was the thought, so that was the goal.
Deborah and then Phil.
Yeah, so this really does go to mitigation requirements. And one thing that ARCs said when they made this request is that once people got down to the permitting, the people who knew Corden and knew HGM had been on the site and did the delineation and have moved on. And so by the time it's time to create the permit, it's, those people have to go back on site. It costs a lot more money for them to go back on site. Whereas if they just got this information in the first place, it would be all ready for permitting. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Phil, go ahead.
Let's say, how deep do you want us to go with the Corden? I mean, is it just PEM, PFO, or do you want to go, into the seasonality and into the modifications?
No, just system and class. That's all we're asking.
So just PEM, PFO, PSS, or the riverine ones or the custard ones.
Right.
Okay, that's pretty good. All right, I hope we're not getting sidetracked here, that our delineations are all being, prepared for some kind of future permitting situations. I can think, probably 30 or 40% of the delineations we do never turn out into a permit. They either avoid the wetland or they're doing it for other purposes.
Okay, good point.
So at this point, the one, and Phil, if you could stay unmuted, the one recommendation that I've heard is to change that threshold to half an acre. And then we heard Jebra and Phil say why they identified that 1/10 of an acre. Do you still recommend a change there, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, of those sort of ARCs kind of situations, I don't encounter them that often. And so, it seems to me that, if you have ARCs type wetlands on site, maybe you can have a tighter spatial requirement, but it just seems like, there's a lot of situations where we're delineating a large wetland and it might be an emergent fringe, and then you have an open water area in the middle and then a forested area somewhere else, but it may be an area that's not really even part of what might be part of a project. And so it seems like we're just generating information that's not really going anywhere. So I still would stick with a half acre.
I'm curious, both Pete, if you have a reaction to that, but also if our RAC members could either give a thumbs up if they agree, or indicate somehow if you support that, or if you are, don't say anything if you're ambivalent either way. But you
support the proposal or support the modification of the
support
proposal?
Support the modification that you just suggested of a half an acre, Phil. But Pete, do you have any reaction to that?
The only reaction I have is the whole size and everything was all driven by a kind of a questionnaire sent to the aquatic resource coordinators about what they needed from our delineation reports, and this is what they told us. So that's why we inserted it.
Understood. Alan?
I tend to want to go more towards being a lumper than a splitter here, and so I'd go bigger. Because I know I've got sites that are mosaics, and there are small areas that could be considered forested, and then they transition to a different type of the different category. I think you need to have some larger area instead of trying to have a real complicated type of table of defining these different categories. I'd go bigger, and I don't even know if half acre. I'd just leave it up to the delineator to decide, what's appropriate. If there's a clear forested area, and if it's only 1/10 of an acre, but it's sitting on the site and everything else around the site is prairie, then you do have a, you know, it's big enough, it's something that should be broke out. But otherwise, it's just, I'd do lumping more than splitting.
Other discussion on this topic? I'm not hearing a lot of discussion. I guess the question is for Phil and for Alan, if you can support this as is or not. The language as it is on the screen.
I do not support it. I think for wetland fill application, if we need to have a diagram that gets things down to 1/10 of an acre, that's just part of the responsibility of the permit app. But for standard delineations, I feel like it's just adding a requirement that doesn't go anywhere for the purposes of determining the wetland boundaries.
Understood. Thanks, Phil. Alan agree. I think also says he cannot support. Thanks for the thumbs down. Brad?
Yeah, I think we need the GIS information. Coming back to that before, I would be fully supportive of this because this will complicate the mapping with large sites.
Pete, do you have any recommendation on how you want to move forward on this one?
Well, since this was a request from the ARCs, I guess we would need a proposal. If this one doesn't work, we would need the proposal of what you would suggest it say, that you could, you know, accept it. And then
Phil proposed a 1/2 acre.
So that's the choice would be then for us would be to take it to the ARCs and say, if we change this to a 1/2 acre, can we live with this?
Well, and just a reminder, I mean, these are recommendations from the RAC. I think we'd appreciate that input from the ARCs, but if RAC members decide that they would like to see this at a 1/2 acre, then that's the recommendation that they're making to the department. So,
okay.
Is there anyone who would not support a change to 1/2 acre? Any RAC members who would not support that change? Raise your hand. Sorry, Brandon.
Yeah, I was just going to say that since you know I'm in an association, I would have to take that back to my folks. So I can't necessarily agree or disagree right now, but I'll go back and ask.
Thanks, Brandon. I think that's understood for at least you and Samantha. When you can give a general indication of where you think things are headed, that's appreciated, but we understand that that you need to take it to your boards. But I guess what I'm hearing right now, unless I hear an objection, is that the RAC would like to propose that this change to a 1/2 acre. So Danielle, could you make that change? And then maybe this is another item that we can report back on, just information wise from the ARCs, Pete, at the next meeting.
Okay. And as I look at the way it's written here now, I want to point out to everyone that this 1/2 acre is referring to the classifications for coordinate and HTM. It's not referring to the ARS. That's kind of a separate part of that set phrase. So an ARS is mapped wherever the ARS is or whatever size it is. You know, and then to get to that, you read the definition and you see what it says about what makes up an ARS in the removal fill guide.
All right, Pete, let's keep moving here.
Okay. Next, we're going to section 10 in section 35, our number 10. And these were questions about this is DSL talks about farm sites here. The question was, farm sites, does this include annually cultivated areas? And we said yes, and among other areas. And are tree farms and orchards intended to be included in this section? And we say farm sites are identified because agricultural management practices can influence a wetland determination. So the thought here is, if it's farmed, you need to explain that to us in this section of the report, and we'll interpret it as needed. So it's a case-by-case thing. I couldn't pick out a tree farm or an orchard right now specifically and say they're not a farm site until I knew the whole situation. So it's a case-by-case.
I see a thumbs up from Phil. Any questions or concerns here? Okay, let's keep moving.
Okay, 11 again, we didn't have any comments about that, but 11C, there was a comment about identified on the map. And the request was, can we change it to identified on a map? And we agreed to that change. And that's 11C, correct? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there's no concerns about that, then we'll keep moving.
Okay. 12A and B. Okay, this was they wanted a text requirement to include information on existing structures, impervious areas, and general vegetation. And we thought the existing language was sufficient to kind of get at what we're looking for, because we already asked for landscape setting, land uses, alterations that likely affected the presence of wetlands. And we talk about existing structures in 14D. So we thought that stuff was already all covered in 12A and B, or in other parts of the rule. The next one is 12E, A through H. And this is kind of, again, getting into court.
Pete, real quick, Phil's got a question.
Okay.
Hey, I know this isn't really part of your revisions, but the part about precipitation requirement, I guess from a professional standpoint of view, I feel like what we're required to provide as precedent stuff, especially, the day of, 2 weeks, in advance, it's sort of garbage information. I've had reviewers, say, well, it looks like it hadn't rained for 3 weeks prior to your delineation. I'm not sure we can rely upon the hydrology. And it's like, well, actually, we frequently have periods of 3 weeks without hardly any rain. Statistically, when you're laying out the data, it looks like, oh my gosh, I'm only 10% of normal for 2 weeks before, but that's actually a reasonable situation we encounter. So I don't know if there's a way to sort of tighten this up, or if we want to just simply default to the Corps of Engineers antecedent tool as a way of presenting that information. But I feel like we're sort of using an outdated thinking on the antecedent precipitation as it's written up.
Right. Good thoughts. This didn't change at all, right? And so you noted that this is from the old rule too. We've always done it this way. It helps the JC and the consultant think about the site. And I understand your point. This may not be enough. There may be additional questions needed or additional things that need to be explained, and I agree with all that. But I'm not sure who initially created this, where this was sourced from, but it's worked for us. It's not been a problem. I don't think it leads people down the wrong path. I agree with your choice of the new tool that the Corps is offering. That's a great tool, especially for the WETS tables. I mean, it's way easier to get a WETS table from that tool than it is from going to the ag sites and making your own, because then you have to choose some hydrology station way off and who knows where. So I think this is a good starting place. I don't see, unless you have a suggestion about how to reword this, but we'd have to kind of decide right now. And I don't know.
I can't do it off the top of my head. I think it's sort of obsolete. And, I especially, when we're doing a delineation in August, it's just garbage information.
Well, everybody knows that. I mean, anybody that does delineations knows that. So it's like, but it's a starting point, because these things are done year round and different times of the year. It is important, so.
I'm not doubting the precedent precipitation information, but if we're not really able to sort of fine tune it now, I understand.
Yeah.
So we can move on.
But I would suggest, right after this is done, once this is effective, this new rule, if it ever gets effective, we're going to work on our guidance doc, and we're going to ask for input from everyone. So as we work through that document, so that'll be a great place to talk about precipitation and how to think about it.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Pete. Let's keep going.
Okay. Okay.
A through E.
Yeah, we had section E, A through H, and that was all those different parts in there. Someone asked about including a category for upland waters, but that, we just kind of in our comments said that's not a category that we would think about as being, we would describe it that way. There was an addition of a mitigation specialist requested that when we talk about streams, we talked about length in feet, we should also add in width, because they need that for considerations about permitting streams. So that was one addition I did since the last RAC meeting, that and width addition.
Any questions about that? Were there any other changes you want to cover here, Pete?
Let's see, moving down. They're all in that response doc, and since none of them led to changes, I guess not.
Okay, if there are no questions or concerns, oh, Brad.
So would,
Oh,
I didn't read.
But this
Go ahead,
actually, okay.
What is it, Pete?
Well, I just saw the glaring one that we removed, due to comments from the RAC about wetlands below ordinary high water.
Right.
The requirement of that specifically, and the point being here, a wetland below ordinary high water is still a wetland. We don't ask for slope wetlands specifically. So why ask for wetlands below ordinary high water specifically? But when a JC does a review of a delineation, and there appear to be significant wetlands, when I say significant, not that means size, not importance. And there's that tool for determining if it's significant or not, or important or size. Then we're going to ask for it, but we're not going to ask for it specifically in rule. So that's the point I wanted to make about the removing of that line.
And Brad, I think you were one of the people who brought this up previously. What do you got for us?
Yeah, no, that's I appreciate that very much. My quick, I don't know if you're going to move on to this beyond this page here. The stream flow duration of other waters. I was just curious, are we looking for ephemeral, intermittent, perennial, or are we looking for something different?
Correct. That was what we're looking for in the description of a waterway. Yeah.
Great.
Jessica, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna make the comment, Peter hit on it though, that just to be mindful of the 0.1 acre shows up here as well, so.
Okay. I want to
that's
pause.
something we want to pull through.
Oh, sorry, thanks, Jessica.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
And thanks, Danielle. I just want to pause here for a moment. I think we can easily go another 10, 12 minutes and keep moving through this document. But at some point, we're going to have a choice, possibly have a choice of whether we want to go a little bit longer and get through the whole document, or delay some of the content until our meeting number 4. So let's just keep that in mind over the next 5 minutes or so, and we'll come back to it, and I'll see how people feel about that. But for the next at least 10 minutes, we can keep moving forward. Alan.
Just a comment on on that line 24. Would it read better if it said length and width in feet?
Looks like we're making that change.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Pete, Pete, do you have a feeling for how much, it looks like we're only about halfway through the document, right? But I don't know if there's as substantive issues as the ones that we covered here.
That's what I think. I think it's going to go quicker unless we have comments.
Okay. Well, whenever Danielle's ready, let's move on to the next one.
Okay. So this was 12F was the next one. Okay, that was, and there was a request to, for an explanation about past developments. And we decided we've already covered that in other parts of the rule. There was one about the use of the word imagery. Can we, add to that, saying such as aerial photography? And we thought it was just sufficient to stick with imagery, allowing the consultant to provide, what's needed to cover the site, and to be specific about aerial photography. What if it's LiDAR? There's other sources of imagery. There's remote sensing from satellites and lots of stuff. Okay, and there was a request to restate some of the rule that had already been stated, and we said it's sufficient just to cite the thing that we've already stated, and someone can just go up above and look at it again. There was a question about the inset map requiring a scale bar on inset maps, on larger maps, and the thought was some inset maps may cover large portions, like, show the state of Oregon and your location on such a map like that. And then in that case, a scale bar would not be needed. because it's just too large of a scale. I agree with that, but I racked my brain for when I'd ever seen that, and I've never seen that. So it's like usually an inset map is so you have your delineation map, and then you have somebody showing a detail map of a close-up of a delineated boundary to give us more detail. Those are the two scales we're talking about. We have the delineation map and that zoom in to show a detail on that delineation map. So I don't, if the RAC has a better way to say that,
Okay.
I'm all ears.
All right, am I in the right spot in the Word document?
Okay, let's see where you are. I'm looking at my own. This is scale bar. It's 13.
Under 13, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was not in the right spot.
Okay.
There we go. Pete, make sure you're calling out the number each time so Danielle can follow.
You bet. I apologize.
Are there any questions or recommendations, alternative wordings that people propose here? Okay. Sounds like we're good, Pete. Keep going.
Okay. The next was the use of the word small scale, and the DSL agreed, and we removed small scale from that definition, and we added in the vicinity just to be a little clearer about what the map should be at the end of 13A.
Okay.
Okay. 13B, there was a question about should we be specific about what did we say, or WAP and or map. I mean, or map and county assessors tax maps. And this, what about things like Metro? They said, but our response was Metro sources their data also from the counties, so it's it's all included in that. 13D, there was a question about the county soil survey map should explain the relationship to the Natural Resource Conservation Survey soil survey maps. And so we inserted NRCS into that definition so that it says the NRCS county soil survey map, including the map unit symbol, name, and hydric status for all soil series mapped within the study area. Is that reference to NRCS sufficient to who made that comment?
We'll assume it's sufficient unless we hear otherwise.
Okay. The RAC, and now we're on to 14F, A through F. Okay, the RAC comments here kind of mimic what we've already talked about in 7 and 12E. And we added, this is again that grouping of right, A through F. Are we on A? The big capital A, little f, capital A through F. Yeah, right. So it's all, once again, we're in now this is the mapping requirements, right, for all these categories. So if once again, we probably should fix our 1/10 of an acre.
Go ahead, keep describing it.
Okay. And so we added and width again. Is it got the right comma in the right place? Okay.
Yep.
And what else did we change here? Okay, and then there was something about recent. Where's the recent? Oh, 14E, little e. Talks about recent. We removed recent from this definition because we thought it was arbitrary. What we're really interested is the location of fill. There was an additional comment, I think, from Phil about location and extent of fill, and that might be a point that might be good to add if the RAC agreed. So right after locations here, it would say locations and extent of fill, removals, water diversions, and other major alterations.
Pete, are you proposing that be added?
Well, I thought it made sense. I just wanted to see if the RAC agreed.
Right. That's what I was asking. So let's hear if there's any. We've got a couple hands. Lynn, did you have something?
I do, but I'm gonna wait.
Okay.
I'll let other RAC members weigh in first.
Okay, Stacy.
I agree. I support adding the word extent of fill.
Thanks, Stacy. Phil?
The main thing I would want to caution, because I offered up the suggestion, is a delineation most of the time is not a forensic delineation. And so, it seems like there's always a trigger point, in a project that would require us to do a forensic kind of analysis, whereas a standard delineation is often going to look at fill material as being the normal circumstances and existing condition. And so I guess I want to be cautious of how we craft any language there to not infer that we're supposed to do a forensic analysis just because there's fill material on site.
Well, that again would be a case by case situation, Phil, if the department thought it might be a violation of the removal fill law. So I mean, the consultant's role is just to identify things when they're visible. Like that's what I was saying. If something's not visible, you're not going to catch it, right? But if there's an aerial that shows, an area that's cleared and now a big mound of dirt, the agency will ask about it, and you likely will have described it already. So, I mean, and this has always been in here. The recent was the new addition here, and then we added removals too, just to match our definitions above. But
yeah, I might be walking back on adding, the approximate extent of, because maybe that's now putting more of an obligation on the investigator to determine the approximate outline of those boundaries that would normally be done under a forensic condition. Whereas if we leave it loose, then maybe, it's handled more on a case by case basis, as has happened. I just had that happen on one of my projects this last year. And, to get to the point of calling it an extent would have required us to get out there with backhoes, which would have really exceeded the what was being required for delineation. So I don't know. The more I talk about it, the more I back off it.
So what I'm hearing is that Phil has withdrawn his suggestion. So if we want to consider adding extent, we need someone else to propose it. So does anyone feel very strongly and really want to see that word extent added enough to propose that change? Lynn?
Well, when I don't know what's above this. I think it's talking about what should be mapped. And in the past, I've always asked for a rough outline of where the fill is. That's the location. It's hard to know what location means other than mapping a polygon. So I don't think we've ever asked for it to be accurately mapped necessarily. That's not what it's ever said in rule, but I mean, I think a lot of this is just for transparency at first, just to say, okay, there's a little pile here, and the delineator shows that they've recognized that by putting it on the map, even if it's not an exactly accurate outline. If we can see it as a reviewer, then we can say, okay, that looks like it captures it, and it looks like it's not that much, and just move on.
Okay.
We're mostly concerned about, the big fills that have been obviously placed. We can see them on aerial photos, changes, and that kind of thing. Those are the ones we would pursue. So it's not saying that we're going to pursue any of these necessarily. We just want to know, because otherwise we're going to have to ask about it, possibly.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good.
Stacy?
Just maybe adding locations of the approximate extent of fill, removals, water diversions, or other major alterations.
I'll open that up to the RAC. I think I heard Phil specifically say that he was walking that back.
And I kind of agree with what Lynn just said, where locations is
sufficient.
Yeah, sufficient enough detail.
So unless there's an objection to leaving it as written here, I think, and Stacy, if you feel strongly about it, otherwise I think we're good to move forward. Okay.
Okay, so
actually, Pete, I'm going to pause here. Are there any non-RAC members who intend to provide some public comment today? And if there are, can you just raise your hand so I know in the interest of time here?
It looks like our one interested party is no longer in the meeting.
Okay, so I think we can continue at least another 10 minutes. Let's keep going, Pete.
Because I think we have a good chance of getting through, except for ones we haven't addressed. Okay, 14 and 16, there was a question about the data requirement being 2 years, being less than 2 years old. But DSL explained that these things are handled on a case-by-case basis, and it really depends on a site-specific situation. So we ignore it. We're not going to do that.
You said this is number 16?
It's referred to both 14 and 16. So they both talked about data and how how old it can be and that sort of thing.
I just want to make sure that
so there's no
Danielle
change.
gets to the right place on the page so we can see what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I can't say exactly where it is in 14. I just identified 14 and 16 in my response because that's what it was addressing. But 16 is data forms specifically. So I guess I'd roll down there.
Just pause for 1 second, please.
So this is about data form requirements. And there was a request to make sure that the data forms weren't older than 2 years old, but DSL suggested not doing that because, case by case, is what really makes
so
it. So
you have not made a change there?
No change. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Let's keep going then, unless there's concerns. Yeah. Keep going.
Okay. The 16B asked for lat long requirements. It asked if it was for the centroid of the site or the actual sample plots. And DSL said actual sample plots because that's the best way to review the data if you're using a GIS, is to see where the data point was taken. Okay, so then we're out of section 35 and we're moving into section 40 unless there's questions about some interim pieces. Okay, in section 40, we had a where was this now? Oh, it was the 3F big C Roman numeral 7. Nope, I must be in the wrong. Okay, F big C, let's see. It might be further down. Let's see. So yeah, there we go. Rejected. These are the reasons for rejecting reports. So it's that F, and then we go down to big C Roman numeral 7. Right.
There we go.
Okay. So
it's 12.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 12. Oh, right. You're right. It's 12. You're right. I read my. I was even a Catholic student. Okay, so we inserted communication in the last RAC meeting just to give, like, if the consultant is communicating with us, we can extend it. But we thought the way this is said now is clear, and we want to get the RAC's thoughts on this. So now we're saying additional clarifying information, requested revisions, comma, or communications requesting additional time are not provided within 60 calendar days of the department's written request. So here we're really specific that communication has to be asking for more time within the 60 calendar days.
I see a thumbs up from Phil. Any other comments or thoughts or opinions? Another thumbs up from Jessica. I'm not seeing any objections here, Pete.
Okay. Moving on to section 50. Now section 50, well, we're passing 45 because there were no comments. So section 50 had this independent review panel. DSL had to remove it because it sunsetted. We got comments saying, can DSL find another process that wouldn't be a contested case that would allow consultants to ask DSL to reconsider a determination? And so we've added the appeal process. So the way it's going to work is the first step is going to be, you'll get your DSL review and approval letter. If the applicant or the consultant or both disagree with that approval letter, they can request reconsideration, and that goes through the aquatic resource specialist, my position, to do that first step. After that review, if again the applicant and consultant disagree with the reconsideration, then they ask for an appeal. Or they can do both. They can start with a contested case right away, or they can ask for an appeal. And then once it goes through the appeal process, they can go back to the contested case if that's the way they want to solve it. So that's the way I wrote this. I think Phil had some suggested edits to it, but I don't have those easily available.
On line 22, it begins with the word reconsideration, and I think you mean decision.
Okay, let's see.
The reconsideration decision is what's the phrase that's used in the first sentence there.
Okay, the appeal option is available only when the disagreement is over a wetland delineation has been subject of a. Yeah, it shouldn't just be. It should be decision as well again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
Lynn? You're muted, Lynn.
I thought the first step was reconsideration, and then after that, it could be either of these contested case or.
That's correct. Yeah.
So wouldn't reconsideration be correct down there? Oh, you're adding the term,
Yeah,
the word
right,
decision. Sorry.
Right. Just because it was a little.
Okay. Never mind.
Okay. Thanks, Pete. Let's keep moving.
Okay, that's it. We're done.
Oh, we are. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's pause here and see if anyone else had comments on other sections or topics, that Pete didn't get, that we didn't cover today. Were there any other areas of concern, questions, comments? Jessica.
Nothing specifically, but I would just echo Samantha's comment at the beginning of needing more time to gather input from the organization I'm representing.
Thanks. So what I'd like to propose here, and to kind of summarize what I heard today, is that by and large, there's support for changes that have been made by Pete and the department. There is the issue of the significant issue of the GIS data. We heard several possible solutions there. One, to make it voluntary. I heard, definitely a desire to see that template. And then there was another suggestion. What if CAD files were also accepted? And I think we agreed to let Pete and the department come back with a proposal there that we will consider at our next meeting. The other, I don't want to call it an outstanding topic, because I just want to reinforce that this process is for the RAC to make recommendations. And so that changing that threshold to 1/2 an acre from 1/10 of an acre was just something Pete was going to get some thoughts on to share at the next meeting. And if there's any change in feelings based on those comments, the RAC could consider, sticking with that 1/2 acre or changing back to 1/10 of an acre. And then again, as Jessica just reminded us, I think we'll try to get this new version out as soon as possible with the proposed, I think the one thing that we don't have in the document right now, Pete, is a recommendation on the GIS data. We'll try to get that out as soon as possible so that folks have a chance to review that with whomever from their organizations needs to see it, and have enough time so that at meeting number 4, we can touch on those key issues that we've identified. And if any others are raised, the earlier you raise those for us, the better. But we'll set our agenda to go after specific line items of the proposed rule changes. And then we have a few other things that we need to accomplish at that next meeting that Danielle will go over. But thanks, everyone. Just great comments and great cooperative spirit here today to get through what is a lot of content. Danielle, do you want to expand on next steps a little bit more?
Yeah. So as Steve mentioned a couple of times, we're going to have a 4th meeting. We don't have a 4th meeting on the books yet. I have a poll here for potential meeting dates, it's Monday through Thursday of the week of January 9th. It's multiple choice. So if you want to check your calendars now to see which of those days works best for you, we'd appreciate it. And we're going to go with the majority.
And is it which works best, or can people click more than one?
They can click more than one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So if you're available all 4 of those days, go ahead and click all 4 of them. Oh, I should launch it. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't see anything.
Yeah, sorry, I opened it on my computer. So now you should be able to make your multiple choice.
And Danielle, can you remind people, in addition to us addressing specific items that we identified today, or maybe are identified over the next week or so, what are the other topics for our agenda?
Yes, so for our next meeting, like Steve said, we're gonna finish up with the proposed rule changes. And we're also going to go over a draft fiscal impact statement, a draft racial equity statement, and a draft overall need for the rules. These 3 documents will be going into the notice of proposed rulemaking, which is what will be published at the beginning of our public comment period. And with regards to our public comment period, it'll be no earlier than March. We haven't decided on a date, but I just wanted to assure y'all that we aren't trying to rush any of this, and we're going to take into consideration what happens at the next RAC meeting also.
Danielle, it looks like we, oh, sorry, right as I speak. Oh, no, we're back to all of them 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, assuming well, geez, they're all equal now. That's weird. Just
Is there a reason that the 2 p.m. is always the time option?
Not necessarily. We were just, that was just being consistent and narrowing down our options. Is there a better time, Jessica, for you?
Oh, I mean, for me, like Thursday, the 12th is good. Earlier in the day, pretty much anytime earlier in the day. But I have another meeting, a standing meeting at 3 p.m. So
Right.
To get
Gotcha.
a good 2-hour block, I would, if this meeting started earlier, that'd be better for me.
Danielle, considering these results and assuming there's a few people maybe who aren't at our meeting today, do we think we would want to do a doodle poll and see if we can differentiate here? Because right now they're all equal. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know if because I guess if you've already submitted it, you can't go back and change your answers. I have a different view on my end for the poll. We can send out something through Outlook to do a poll for meeting dates. And I can also look, I believe that I should be able to look at who answered what to kind of see if, multiple people picked all the days and like, yeah.
Right. Like if someone's on vacation the whole week.
Yeah. So I can send something out for maybe, I'm hearing like 1 p.m. would be better. So yeah. Okay. I'll figure something out.
We'll do that real soon though, folks, so we can get something on everyone's calendar. So again, meeting number 4 hopefully will be our last meeting. I think we got through most items today. There's a few outstanding items, and Pete, I think we want to commit to, and Danielle and Lynn, to getting something out as soon as we can, an updated version, and Pete will get some opinion on how to approach the GIS situation. We'll get that out sooner rather than later, so everyone has time to consider those changes. We'll meet in January and start with those items, and then move on to the other items that Danielle mentioned. And that should be that, assuming we don't run into any major roadblocks. So thanks again, everyone, for sticking with us through this process today. I know it can be a little tedious, but your comments really help make this a better rulemaking in the end. Pete, anything you'd like to add?
Just reiterate, thank you very much. It's been a great working with all you folks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.